Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedules to be here. It's always great to talk to an audience about TradeStation. Today, we are going to test your artistic skills by using drawing tools on TradeStation, and you probably will have an opportunity to laugh at my skills at drawing on a TradeStation chart. But we're going to talk about everything that is part of the TradeStation platforms in terms of drawing and how you can use those tools and take advantage of them. But before we get started, there are some disclosures that we need to go over. And before I get over to the disclosures, I just want to say that we have a lot of people connected here in class. In fact, we are close and reaching close to the 500 people in this webinar. There are going to be a lot of questions about the TradeStation functionality, and I'm going to use this opportunity to invite everyone to join me in my daily classes in the TradeStation Masterclass. I'm going to get to that in a little moment. So let's go ahead and share my screen and go over some of the disclosure information that I talked about. Keep in mind that every symbol and idea that I talk about in this presentation is for educational purposes only. It is not a recommendation of TradeStation. Also, active trading is not suitable for everyone, especially if you're trading options, which carry a high degree of risk. If anybody would like to read more about the disclosure information, please visit our website, TradeStation.com, and you're going to find all the disclosure information there. At You Can Trade, and when I say we, I mean TradeStation, hosts two channels. We have the Getting Started with TradeStation channel, which is a lot of free content that you can view at any time. We have recorded videos, we have presentations on different platforms. We meet live one day a week on Wednesdays. And we even have an open Q&A session where you can come in and ask any questions related to the platform. All that for free. And for those of you that want to take your TradeStation knowledge to the next level, we are hosting the TradeStation Masterclass. It's an online program. It follows the same content that we used to cover in our in-person masterclass. Now that program is being offered online at $59 a month. So I want to invite everyone to join the TradeStation Masterclass and interact with the TradeStation community. The $59 will give you premium courses, strategy ideas. We meet live every single day, so you have opportunities to ask me any questions related to the TradeStation platform. We have live sessions. These are all archived. So if you miss anyone, you can always watch a recording. And as I said earlier, we have open Q&A sessions where we meet and we talk about anything that is bugging you or anything that you cannot figure out on TradeStation. We can work on it together right here in class. All this for $59 a month. And the best thing is that you get a 14-day free trial. So you can join the community, test it out for 14 days, and decide whether it is something you want to keep. All right, so I'll leave you guys with that idea. Think about it. And at the very end, I'll circle back and mention it one more time. But let me go ahead and switch over to TradeStation. I'm using the TradeStation platform right here. And on my chart, let me go ahead and do something here. Let me pull up the chat just in case I'm able to take some questions live, which I doubt, but I'll try. Okay, so drawing tools. I'm going to talk about the things you can do with drawing, and I'm going to start off with the drawing toolbar. So if you find that you are the type of trader that draws a lot, and when I say draw, I mean trend lines, horizontal lines, vertical lines. If you go into the more analytical ones like the Fibonacci, the Andrews Pitchfork, the GanFan, if you do a lot of drawings on the chart, you probably need a drawing toolbar right here on the TradeStation chart. And the way that you enable that drawing toolbar is by going to the drawing menu and clicking right there at the bottom. It says toggle drawing toolbar. When you do that, it adds the drawing toolbar buttons on the left-hand side, and they're easy to access by just clicking on them. It's going to take a little bit of time for you to get used to the look of the button to know exactly which one's which. But if you take your mouse cursor and you hover over any of these buttons, it tells you what the button represents. So if I hover over this one, I know that that's the horizontal line. If I click on it, of course, I'll be able to draw a horizontal line. I'm going to leave the drawing tool here on the left-hand side, but also be aware that you can go to the drawing menu and toggle that drawing toolbar on and off. Okay, let's start with some of the drawing tools that are available on the TradeStation platform that are of non-analytical value. When I say non-analytical, it's because they usually don't help you identify support resistance levels, or maybe they don't help you identify some reversals or some retracements, but they're there for you to mark the chart in any way that you want. Sometimes you may want to annotate a reminder. You may want to give yourself a little bit of a notation on the chart. You may want to highlight a certain section of the chart analysis window, and all those things can be done using some of the drawing tools in here. For example, I have arrows up and down. So if you want to mark something, let's use this arrow down. If I want to mark this candle, I just click on it and it gives me an arrow right there. If I double click on that arrow, I should have the ability to change the style of it. Let's see. Let me right click on the arrow instead. Okay, I'm going to click on edit arrow down. So here I can change the style. Notice that you have different style arrows. And you can also change the transparency of any drawing tool if you want to do that. You know, a lot of the drawing tools in TradeStation will be at 100% solid, but sometimes you may want to drop the intensity because you don't want the drawing tool to be so prominent. You just want it to be like a watermark in the background. So use the transparency slider to do that, just to tone down the brightness of any drawing tool that you have on the chart. It also exists on studies. So if you want to do the same thing for studies, you just have to go to the style tab of the studies and tone down the brightness on any of the lines. Okay, so arrows are there. In the drawing menu, we also have ellipses and rectangles. As the name implies, that's what they do. They draw an ellipsis or a rectangle. If I draw a rectangle, I just have to click once and then click twice to draw the rectangle, and it'll draw it like this. I know the colors are not very or very pretty, but you can always format the colors and the style of any drawing tool. I'm going to right click here and edit the rectangle. And notice that you have the color for the line and you have the color for the fill. If you don't like the bright blue, if you don't like the bright red for the outline, you can just change the colors here. Let's say, for example, that we want just a darker gray, and maybe for the line, we just want a white line. We can set that as the default right here, checkbox set as default, so that next time you draw a box, we'll have the same colors that you like. And that way it won't stand out that much, okay? So that's a rectangle. If we come over here and click on ellipse, same concept. You click once and then you click a second time to draw the ellipse around the area where you want it to be drawn. Again, you can right click on that ellipse. You'd have to right click on the actual outline in order to access the menu. So right click and it says edit ellipse, and you can change the style of that as well. Let me go back here to drawing. We have text annotations as well. Let me select text, and you can write anything. For example, right here on this arrow that I typed in, I can say this is my entry. And it just stays there. You know, when you draw something on a chart analysis, that item that you're drawing gets anchored or gets attached to that candle where you drew it. So as the chart moves historically, your drawing tools and your drawing annotations will move with it. So if I mark a bar, this is my entry, it'll continue on with it and it'll stay with the chart, which is convenient. And the same way that I edited that ellipses and the same way that I edited that rectangle, I can do the same here with the text. So if I want to make the text bigger, I just have to right click, edit the text, change the color, change the font, and change the style. And again, anytime you change the color, the style of any drawing tool in TradeStation, and you want to set that as your default, you can do that by just checking the box here that says set as default, and it'll be like that going forward, okay? Let's go ahead and take a look at more drawing tools. Let me remove this one that I just drew, and I'll remove this arrow as well. By the way, this marking that I see here, the market 100 and that red the dotted line, is just account orders and positions. It just means that at one point I traded Apple on my simulator, and it's just telling me where I entered and where I exited. It was a losing trade, as you can see. So let me go ahead and remove that. Let me remove that because for some of the drawing tools that we're going to work with, this will be in the way. And in order for you to disconnect your TradeStation chart from your trading activity, you go here to the Settings tab, Account Orders and Positions, and we uncheck the box for status, click OK, and now the information is gone. That way we can focus on the chart and we can focus on the analysis techniques that we are going to be drawing. So those drawing tools that I just showed you are non-analytical. These are just things that you put on the chart if you want to highlight certain sections, if you want to make some annotations on the chart, if you want to mark some candles, you can use the arrows. Now let's talk about some lines that you can draw, like horizontal lines and trend lines. Let's start off with horizontal lines, which I find very useful, and I'm going to show you why. So I'm going to click on horizontal line. I'm going to start clicking here on the left-hand side on the toolbar. Rather than going through the menu here, it's the exact same thing. It's just, I'm just doing it for convenience. So I'm going to click on this one that is a horizontal line. I click it. My cursor changes into a little dash, implying that I can click and draw a line. But before I just click, I'm going to click and drag, because that gives you flexibility over where you want the horizontal line to be drawn. For example, the price of Apple, I can see here on the right-hand side, is $128.70. Let's suppose that I want to draw a trend line at $130. For some reason, I want to be alerted if Apple, in this case, trades at 130 or higher. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag my line until I see 130 right there on the tooltips. And you can see that it's a little challenging to drop it right at 130 even. In fact, the price that I see there is 130.02 cents. If I drop it in there, by the way, I've changed the color and the style of the line, and you can do that. I already showed you that you can right-click on any drawing tool, change the color, change the style. I've changed the thickness because I find it easier to see when it's thicker. But here on the left-hand side, I can see that it was dropped on 130.02 cents. Which is not the price that I want, which is okay, because when you draw lines on the chart, you can always come back and adjust them for them to be on the exact point that you want them. So what I'm going to do is right-click on that trend line, and I'm going to click on Edit Horizontal Line. There's a few things here that I can do. One of those is here in Data, is pretty much supply the anchor point of that horizontal line. Where is it that I want it to be? So instead of 130.02, I just want it to be on 130 even. So I'm just going to type the price in, and that's it. I click OK, and now you can see that it's moved to exactly 130 even, no pennies. And one thing that I do with these horizontal lines is I started talking about horizontal lines. I've been being notified if the price goes to 130. Drawing tools in TradeStation can be turned on for alerts. So I can right-click on that line, go back to Edit Horizontal Line, and go to the Alerts tab, and I can turn on the alert. That's very simple, right? So if anybody at TradeStation is looking for a price alert, one of the easiest ways to do it is just plotting a line and turning on the line for alerts. I'm going to choose Alert once per bar, otherwise it alerts every single tick, and then click OK. And that's it. The line is hot, and as soon as Apple touches the line, I should be alerted. The same happens with trend lines. Let's do one. Trend lines is this button right here. I'm going to click it. Let's suppose that I'm going to click from this trough to this trough, okay, from here to here. Now, here's a challenge. If you are drawing a trend line freehand, sometimes it is hard to be precise as to the low of that candle. You know, that's a very, very detailed, very finite point, and it's hard to pinpoint it. I can click here and notice that it's not really attached to the low of that bar. So let me go ahead and remove that. What I do when I want to be precise as to the price that I want the drawing tool to attach, I come over here to the drawing menu and I turn something called snap mode on. Not sure if you are aware of this, but snap mode is a way of making your drawings attach to the closest price of the candle or the closest price of the bar in relationship to where you're clicking. So if I turn that feature on, which is on my toolbar, this button down here. So instead of going through the menu, I can just click on this button, which is snap mode. And as long as you see that blue outline around the toolbar button, you know that it's turned on. Now, if I click on my trend line button, and I don't have to even click on the low here itself. Imagine that I'm clicking a 1/4 of an inch off the candlestick. And as soon as I click, take a look at my line. It automatically attaches to that closest low. So I don't have to be precise. It's going to make sure that it attaches to the closest price available. And then I can just grab my cursor, move it over here to this other low, and notice that it attaches to it as well. Once it attaches, I just click a second time, and my line is created. That's my trend line. And the same way that I turned on an alert for the horizontal line, I can come here and turn the alert for that as well. I'm going to right click, click on Edit Trend Line, go to Alerts, enable the alert, and you can say alert once. And sometimes what I do is I come over here because you have different ways in which the alert can be triggered. You know, by default, it's looking for the price to touch the line. But what if the price doesn't really touch it, but there's a gap down? And all of a sudden, you know, from 128, it drops and it jumps the trend line and it starts trading lower. In order for me to cover myself in that specific scenario, I choose this behavior, breakout intra and inter bar. Intra is when the actual candle touches the line, but inter bar is when there's a gap, the price jumps in and the bar doesn't even touch the line. So if it doesn't touch the line, but it trades above it or the other side, in this case, it would be below it, I would get the alert as well. So make sure that you notate how the alert behaves and that you can change the behavior of that alert. I'm going to click OK. The trend line has been turned on, so it's hot. As soon as there's a touch on the line or a jump over the line, I should be alerted. Another way that I use trend lines, which I find very useful, and I'm going to show it to you, is to use it as a measuring tool. Not many people use trend lines as a measuring. They usually just draw them to identify some sort of a support or maybe some sort of a resistance. But it's very interesting that I can use a trend line to measure distance between 2 points on a chart. So let's say, for example, that I'm looking at this drawdown, at this drop, this downtrend from this high to this low. Very significant, right? I can see, I can look at the prices here on the right-hand side. I know that it was somewhere between $137, and here I can guess that it was maybe 104. So that's about, a 30-point move. I can maybe approximately say that it took, 2 weeks, but I'm just guessing from my visual cues. Would it be better for me to measure the distance between those 2 points and know exactly what happened? Well, you can do that by using a trend line. What I can do is click on the trend line button here on the left. I'm going to click on that high. Remember that if you have snap mode on, it'll snap to the closest price possible. And then I'm just going to come over here to this low and click. Now that draws the trend line. And in order for you to see the measurements, what you can do is click on the line and hold your mouse button. So let me go ahead and do that. And there it is. It gives you all this information. It gives you information about the begin time and price, the end time and price. It gives you the angle of the line. It's a 71-degree angle on the downtrend. The net change, $34.88. So I was kind of right when I said that's about $34. But look at the percent change, 25% change drop. The bar count is 12 bars. So it took 12 bars from one to the other. And the time span was 19 days. All that information is very valuable to someone that is measuring price movement from one point to another. And if you want that information to be visible at all times, this is what you can do. I'm going to double click on the line. You can either double click on the line, or you can also right click on the line to edit it. I'm going to edit the trend line. And here I'm going to go to the labels tab, and I'm going to turn on the labels, show labels. I want to show the percent change, the net change, and the time span. Maybe I want to show the bar count as well. Why not? And I'm going to, well, right justify could be an idea. Let's do right justify and see what it looks like. I'm going to click OK. And this is the information right there. So let's uncheck right justify and see what that does. If I uncheck that, it'll do it on the other side. Here we go. So we have the exact point movement, the percentage drop, how many bars and how many days are between those two price points. So use the trend lines also not only as a way of drawing support and resistance levels, but also to measure points between A and B. If you don't want a line to extend, that's very simple to adjust. You would just have to right click on the line and then say, do not extend right. I haven't shown you the right click menu, but from the right click menu, you have multiple options that can modify the style and look of any line. So here I can go to, from the right click on extend right, and then you can see how the line is segmented. It's truncated between the two anchor points. Every line, at least every trend line in TradeStation, has anchor points. The anchor points are the ones that you click on. So this first trend line that I drew, if I click on it, you're going to see a whole series of white dots appear on the line. But two of those dots are going to appear bigger than the others. Those two are the anchor points of the line. So here I have one, and here I have another one. If I want to readjust this trend line and maybe attach the second anchor point to another low, I can just click on that node and move it over to the next low over. Okay, so always be aware that you can adjust any drawing tool by dragging it from the nodes. Now you can also create parallels. Let's say, for example, we drew that line. We want to create some sort of a channel on this very slight uptrend for Apple. So I want to create a parallel. All I need to do is right click on that line and select new parallel. That'll draw another line with the exact same angle. And all you need to do is drag that line to a different location. So now you can sort of create a channel around the data for this particular symbol to identify what you think are support and resistance levels and be able to be watchful of any breakouts on those two lines. Okay, so great feature, great functionality. Please practice that on your own TradeStation platforms. I'm sure that you are going to enjoy that. All right. Now, great question here about the time frames. I'm sorry if I haven't been able to take a lot more questions on the chat. I know that you are asking a lot of questions, and I want to invite you to join me in the TradeStation's channels on You Can Trade so that we can follow up and I can teach you all the things related to drawing tools. But one of the questions that we get asked a lot is, can I change the time frame and still look at these drawing tools? I'm looking at a daily chart of Apple. As long as I use the same chart window, I'm able to change the time frame and be able to take a look at these drawing tools. I just have to be aware, or I just have to be sure that the starting point of these drawing tools are included in the historical data. What I mean by that is these lines that I drew, they were anchored to September 21st. If I go to an intraday chart and I don't have September 21st on the chart, then I will lose that anchor point and the drawing tool will not show up. Let me see what on my horizontal line, I have it right there. But if I change the time frame here, let's go ahead and change it to a 60-minute chart. Okay, on a 60-minute chart, you can see how that I don't have any drawings. The reason for that is because it only goes back to November 5th. We already said that the anchor points of some of my drawings go back to September 21st. So I'm going to load 90 days of historical data. Let's see if after loading the data, there we go. So once you have enough historical data on the chart to include the anchor points of anything that you've drawn, then you can apply it to any other time frame. This is a 60-minute chart on the same drawings that I drew on the daily time frame. Let me go ahead and switch back to daily. Okay, this is my daily chart. Perfect. Okay, let's talk about some other drawing tools. If I want to clear out my chart, a quick way to do that, over here on the left-hand side, there is a button that says Remove Select Drawing Objects. If I click there, I get this dialog, and I can just select the type of analysis techniques that I want to remove. You only get the ones that you've drawn, so that's very easy. I'll just select the horizontal line and the trend line, or you can just click on Select All, and then click OK. That clears out your chart of anything that you have drawn. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the more analytical type analysis techniques. We have about 20 minutes in our favor. In the drawing menu, let's talk about Andrew's Pitchfork. I'm going to show you how a lot of these drawing tools are drawn, but I'm going to point you to a lot of documentation that is not only available inside of the TradeStation platform, but information that you can search online. These are drawing tools that are not exclusive to TradeStation. They've been around for ages, and there's a ton of information and a ton of ways of interpreting these drawing tools in order to make trading decisions. So rather than giving you my own spin on these drawing tools, I'm just going to show you how to use them, how to format them, and then you decide how you want to use them and how you want to interpret them. But Andrew's Pitchfork requires 3 clicks. Most of the time, when you draw the Andrew's Pitchfork, you're going to be drawing from a trough to a peak and then to a trough. The starting point is going to be point number 1. Let me go ahead and click on this trough. Then I'm going to extend my cursor and click on this peak. And then I'm going to extend and click on this trough again. That is what draws the pitchfork. You have to draw 3 points. I would draw them from trough, peak, trough, or maybe select peak, trough, peak. Okay, that way you can see how the pitchfork extends. And what happens is that the very first point that you click on, that'll determine the middle line. So that is the middle line. The second and the third point that you click on, that'll be a perpendicular line against the line that you first started. That line that goes right through the middle is going to go right through the middle of that line that you drew from point 2 to point 3. And that's exactly how the pitchfork is drawn. So the middle line goes from very first point that you click on through the middle or through the midpoint of the other line that is created between point 2 and point 3. What does it do? A lot of these drawing tools that we're going to take a look at are ways of interpreting and looking at support and resistance levels. It is interesting that as soon as I drew this pitchfork, what is happening to the price activity of Apple? Take a look. Take a look at that downtrend right here that I identified on this Andrew's pitchfork. And all of a sudden, look at the price activity following one of the sides of this pitchfork. It's interesting. Sometimes you can draw something on the chart and it's so amazing and incredible how some of these support resistance lines do align with the market behavior. Let's take a look at another one. By the way, if you want to modify the Andrew's pitchfork, all you need to do is right click and edit Andrew's pitchfork. A couple of things here that you can do. You can add more lines. See right now, let me move this over. This is split up in percentages. So it goes from 100% to 0% based on the second 2 points that you selected. But you can add more percentages. Like for example, if you wanted to turn on the 25% and the 75, and maybe do the minus 25 and the 125, those are just going to be additional lines right here on the Andrew's pitchfork that you can also analyze to see any other projections and price activity. Let me remove this. The GanFan. By the way, some of these drawing tools like Andrews Pitchfork was developed by a guy with the last name of Andrews. GanFan was developed by a guy with the last name of Gan. So they take on the name of the person that created them. So let's go look at the GanFan. The GanFan is a very interesting idea. And as I said before, if you need a little bit more information to understand how these drawing tools should be interpreted, I encourage everyone to go to the web and find out information there. But if I click on this trough to draw the GanFan, this is what it looks like. And what it does, it measures price movement against time. If I go into the settings of this tool, let me just go there for a moment. You can see that there's a box that measures points per bar. So it's going to measure, in this case, 50 cents against each bar. And as it goes measuring the price movement every 50 cents per bar, it's going to draw this middle line. The gray line that runs right in the middle is 1 to 1. You see the ratio right there on the tip of the line. And 1 to 1 means that we're using the size that we specify in the settings, in this case, 50 cents to 1 bar. So 50 cents to 1 bar, that's our ratio. If you want to have it 1 to 1, so it makes a little bit more sense, you can edit this and say, I want 1 point or $1 per bar. So now look at this gray line. The gray line shifted because now I'm using a 1 point movement against 1 bar. And the idea here is for that gray line to be as close as possible to the 45-degree angle. And then the other two lines are the fan. That's why it's called the Gan fan. We'll just use different ratios. Over here on the cyan line or the blue line to the bottom side of the 1 to 1 is a 2 to 1. So it's actually using twice the amount of time. So it's using the 1 point movement against 2 bars. And that's why it's a little bit more slanted, or the angle is a little bit flatter than 45 degrees. As opposed to this other one, the blue one, which is using 1 to 2, in the sense of it's using 2 of the points that you specify against 1 bar. And again, this is to be able to identify some of the support resistance levels and see how the market activity relates and bounces back and forth between the lines. That's a GanFan. We talked about horizontal lines, vertical lines. Here's the regression channel. I believe that I did see somebody ask about regression channels. Okay, so the regression channel is a very interesting tool. You are going to select 2 points in your chart, and this tool will calculate a regression line. Let me take a look at, or maybe use this trough, and I'll use this peak right here. What it does, it draws that middle line, which is the best fit to all the data points that are around that line. And then it draws standard deviations above and below. If you're familiar with standard deviations, specifically 2 standard deviations, you know that the majority of the prices are going to be inside the channel. So this is an interesting way of looking at how Apple is bouncing back and forth between these extremes. Take a look at when it went over to this top, which we didn't even touch. We drew this regression channel from this trough all the way to this high, and notice how this high just bounced from this support level, from this resistance level, and came back down. An interesting concept. And a lot of markets, when you draw these lines, follow these features and this behavior, which I find fascinating. The regression channel can also be adjusted if you double click. There's different settings that you can play with. You can adjust the standard deviations. For example, if you go into the calculation, you can specify how many standard deviations to use or what price to base the regression channel on. So all those things can be edited. And once you become an expert on regression channels, you can, experiment with all these different settings to see if they tell you anything. All right. That's the regression channel. And in the drawing menu, we have time cycles, trend lines. We talked about time cycles. It's very interesting. And the way that it works, let me click on it, is just click once on the chart, and it creates these semi-arcs at the bottom of the chart at the exact same time cycle. So the idea here is for you to slice up your chart into segments that are exactly the same distance. Most of the time, what I see here is convert this arc style into lines. And that can be easily done by right-clicking and unchecking arc style. Notice how it automatically switches to vertical lines, but I can still adjust the distance between those vertical lines. So if at any point you want to be somehow alerted whenever you've reached a certain time frame, like it's already been 10 bars, it's already been 20 bars, or let's say, for example, you want that line to fall on every Monday, you can do that by just grabbing one of the knots here at the bottom and adjusting it left or right. If you move it left, you'll be reducing the time span. If you adjust it right, you'll be increasing the time frame. And again, I can right click on the lines, edit the time cycle, and in the settings tab, actually the alerts tab, I can enable the alert whenever it's approaching the next cycle. So that's an interesting concept. You know, you can create these time cycles, and every time that you're approaching one of these lines, then it's going to give you an alert for whatever reason. You know, maybe you're doing some analysis based on time. Maybe you're doing, maybe you are holding positions a specific amount of time, and you want to test that idea going forward and want to be notified when a specific time frame is approaching. Okay, that's the time cycle right here inside of TradeStation. Then right here in the drawing menu, we go into the world of Fibonacci. Fibonacci has a whole collection right here in the drawing menu. You can see that we have the Fibonacci cycles, we have the Fibonacci price extension lines, the retracement calculator, the retracement lines, speed resistance arcs, speed resistance fan, and time extension lines. All of them are based on the same notion of Fibonacci, the Fibonacci number sequence. So we are going to deal with some percentages that are created around this number sequence. The Fibonacci retracement lines are the ones that are most common. So if I want to draw, let's say for example, I want to draw this, the Fibonacci retracement lines using this downtrend. I'm going to go here from the very top to the very bottom here. And you can see how it measures that in 100%. But inside that measurement that I did, I see the Fibonacci levels. And the Fibonacci main levels are the 23.6, the 38.2, and the 61.8. And you see those horizontal lines plotted on the chart. Now here we can see how the price activity retraces and bounces back and forth between the lines. I'm not sure if you noticed, but here, when we had this big trend or downtrend, and all of a sudden it retraced back to the 61.8 line, that's as far as it went. Is that a coincidence? Maybe, maybe, but you can see how interesting it is that it actually hits one of the Fibonacci levels. And then you can see the other activity bouncing back and forth between the lines. This is the Fibonacci retracement tool that allows you to draw these Fibonacci levels on the chart. Of course, you can edit this. You can add more percentages if you want to. For example, most traders, they like to have a 50% line, which is not a Fibonacci number, but we can see the 50% level in here. If you want to remove it, all you need to do is right-click on the Fibonacci line, any one of them, and you have to edit the Fibonacci price retracement lines. Another variation of this is the price extension lines. So instead of me deciding the area that I want to draw, like from a peak to a trough, I'm actually using that measurement but to project it into the future. Let me show you an example. I'm going to go here to the drawing menu. I'm going to use the Fibonacci price extension lines. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this downtrend from peak to trough. So I'm going to go over here to the peak of this little downtrend and then go all the way to the bottom. It measures that distance, and notice that now I see the Fibonacci lines available on my chart. So I can drop those Fibonacci lines anywhere I want. Now, if I wanted to draw them right here, I could. Or if I wanted to maybe extend them to the current bar, I can do that as well. So I just projected this measurement that I took from point A to point B into the future. Now I can grab my chart, drag it over here to the left, and I can see as the market plays out in real time, how it bounces back and forth between these lines. If it happens, I'm not saying that it does, but I do encourage everyone to take a look at the Fibonacci, because sometimes it is surprising on how well it follows these Fibonacci levels. So these are the Fibonacci price extensions. Let me reset my chart. Let me go to my drawing menu. The retracement calculator is just similar. It's all based on the Fibonacci numbers, but instead of giving you lines, it gives you a little table with prices that are calculated based on that Fibonacci. So let's say, for example, that I want to use the same downtrend that I have here. So what I do is I measure from this peak to this trough, and then over here. So that, of course, is going to give you all these different prices. First of all, it tells you the prices that you clicked on. I clicked on 137, then I clicked on 103, and then I clicked on 125. So that gives me a percent retracement of 64.65. That is the retracement from point B to point C. So at first it measures point A to point B, that is 100%. And then the second or the third point that you add, that's going to be the retracement. It actually retraced 64.65%. Now from point B to point C, you have all these different Fibonacci levels, and it gives you the specific price of those levels. And this is what is the Fibonacci calculator. You can use it if you want to know the specific price levels for each one of the percentages. Once you click OK, it just goes away. But it's a quick way for you to calculate these levels very quickly. A lot of traders use the Fibonacci support and resistance levels to also set targets and set stops. Especially, if they see a price bouncing off one of those lines, they usually set that as a stop if it retraces back to that level. Let's take a look at drawing. We have the speed resistance arcs. This is the same concept, of the percentages of the Fibonacci and how it bounces back and forth between them. But instead of showing the retracements as horizontal lines, it's going to show them as arcs. So it gives you an additional time component by allowing you to see an arc. When you see a horizontal line, there's no speed to that. There's no fluctuation in that level. When you have an arc, of course, it introduces a new element to that rounded line. Let me give you an example. Let's say that I draw from this trough to this peak. There we go. That, of course, is a 100%. Take a look at the 38% Fibonacci level. It's not a horizontal line, but it actually just draws a little rounded area. Take a look at the other ones. This one right here. You can see that this is with a 100%. The 138 is another Fibonacci level, and the 161 is another Fibonacci level. Not within the 0 to 100 range, but it also you can do additional projections into the future. All right. And we have the fan and the Fibonacci time extension lines. The fan, it's pretty similar to the GanFan in the sense that it just draws, if I draw from a trough to a peak, it draws a box, but instead of me showing, these horizontal levels for Fibonacci, I'm actually showing diagonals, angles, projecting into the future. So you have all these different variations of the same idea: horizontal lines, arcs, angles, using the Fibonacci numbers. You can see that these lines are crossing the Fibonacci levels right here. The yellow line is the 50%, but the red line is the, let me show you. Let me just double click. The red line is the one at 61%, and the blue line is at 38%, which are the Fibonacci levels based on the box here that you drew. And what else? What else is left here? Under drawing, you also have, the time extension lines. Fibonacci time extensions. So if I draw from this trough to this peak, it measures that as the 100%, but then it provides you with all the different projections into the future. That measurement that you did at the very beginning gets projected into the future with the same distance. So this line that says 100% is the same distance that I drew at the very beginning. But in between and after the 100%, you also have the additional Fibonacci numbers that you can play with. What happens at those levels? It's interesting to see. At the same distance that we drew here, where we have this uptrend, it took that same amount of time to do this other downtrend at 100%. And take a look at the behavior of the market at all of these Fibonacci levels. They say that because of the amount of traders that are following the Fibonacci, that it's very obvious that markets are going to change at those levels. So it is interesting that we have these tools here that we can plot on a chart to see if that is true. Is everyone sensitive to these Fibonacci levels, and are markets sensitive to them? Is all about drawing them on your chart, knowing them how to draw them. It's the first step. And that's why we did this class, to show you that they're there and how to draw them, but also how to interpret them. And do not give up if you find that something or one market doesn't follow the Fibonacci levels. Do not give up on them, because eventually we're going to learn how to best draw and how to best identify point A and point B to draw these Fibonacci levels and be able to use them as a trading strategy. This is our offer. Masterclass is happening every single day. If it's a little bit too much for you, we have the Getting Started channel. It's a free channel. We are live there every single week. You can come and join us and ask us questions on Wednesdays. But if you want that personal attention, if you want to have somebody every single day that you can ask questions and you can interact with, that is what the TradeStation Masterclass channel is for. Join us for 14 days. So make sure that you visit us there, check the content out. We have daily classes where we can answer all your questions. All right, well, that is it. Thank you guys and gals for joining me today. It was a great pleasure spending all this time with you, and I really hope to see you in the TradeStation Masterclass. So everyone, have a wonderful afternoon and keep you and your family safe. Good night, everyone.